Welcome, good morning, good afternoon, wherever you are joining us from. It is a pleasure to be with you today. My name is Ashley Lance, and I am a senior associate with Griffin-Hammis, and it is, just a pleasure to be joining you this afternoon. I'm joining you from the lovely state of Iowa. If you're wondering where that is, it is below the state of Minnesota and above the state of Missouri. So right in the middle of the country and often identified as a flyover state. So I hope that you are safe. I hope that you are well. And thank you for carving out a little bit of time this afternoon out of your day, especially on your Friday, to talk about ethics of customized employment. A couple of housekeeping things real quick. All of you will be muted throughout the time that we're together right now. Please use the chat box. Excellent, Vanessa, hello from Arizona. Hopefully it is warm and beautiful in Tucson today. So we'll primarily be using the chat box. I'm hoping that we can have a conversation, particularly among this small group, as we all face various ethical concerns in scenarios, particularly in this work, because it is so individualized and so specific. And if it works out, we can maybe unmute folks towards the end, depending upon time. Also, there'll be some links shared for documents that are referenced throughout the PowerPoint and the presentation today as well. So I will not be able to see our chat box. So Dallas is going to be helping me with managing the chat box while we get started. So ethics of customized employment. Let's dive in. So you see a picture of pool water, right? And so to get us started, I think particularly in the world that we're living in right now, there's nothing like a little bit of humor to add to our day. So to help us dive into a sticky topic with bad puns and all, I want to start with the question of, have you ever peed in the pool? And no worries, you don't have to respond in the chat box and there's no poll, because statistically speaking, people have done research on this, believe it or not. There is so much pee in the pool that literally everyone has peed in the pool. Now, I'm sure there may be a few of you who are saying, no, not me. And maybe there are one among thousands of people that have never. But statistically, everyone has peed in the pool. So what does this have to do with ethics, right? And why in the world are we talking about peeing in the pool when you are hoping to talk about the ethics of customized employment? But I think it's an interesting idea around ethics, because peeing in the pool is something that I think in a room we would kind of stiff our nose at, or maybe be like, ooh, gross, no, I've never done that. But however, what I'm more interested in is the justification in our minds that takes place, that statistically nearly every human being has done it. But what goes through our mind, right? Of, well, no one's going to be able to see if I pee in the pool. You're in the water. It's highly inconvenient and uncomfortable oftentimes to get out when you're warm and cozy in the water. Who wants to get out and walk to the bathroom? You know that every child in the pool has been peeing in the pool, and technically, I think pee is sterile. So before you know it, nearly everyone has justified the decision to pee in the pool, right? And so now, when we're thinking about the idea of a more serious topic, like the ethics of customized employment, and thinking about supporting people in obtaining career pathways and living a life of working to their full potential, that's a much more serious topic, right? But I think with the weight that is often placed on employment specialists, on employment specialist managers and directors of employment programs and vocational rehabilitation counselors, there's a lot of weight and pressures that oftentimes we justify our decisions, right? And so we'll talk about various ethical dilemmas that we face, particularly in delivering customized employment. By the end of our time together today, which is short, I'm hoping that you'll leave with the following things: that you'll feel comfortable describing the difference between ethics and fidelity, that you'll identify the ethical guidelines in the field of supported employment, that you'll be able to describe some various ethical dilemmas specific to customized employment and hopefully be able to share a few of your own as well. And to leave with some sort of structure for ethical decision making. So first, before we dive into the topic further, right, that we need to understand the difference between ethics and fidelity. So what are ethics? Ethics are our moral principles that really govern our behavior, that it's a moral philosophy. It's when that conscience inside of you says, this feels uncomfortable, right? It's in ethics, which I think is interesting, it's a derived term from the Greek word of ethos, right? So, which means a custom or a habit. It's our disposition, right? So as we're delivering customized employment, specifically, what are our moral principles? What guides us to habit, behavior, to keep fidelity of our moral principles, right? And so what is fidelity? Fidelity is how we choose to be faithful to those moral principles, right? So how we choose to be faithful to the ethics or to the moral principles of delivering customized employment. So as we talk about customized employment, and I assume that many of you are very comfortable with customized employment, but just in case you are brand new, I want to talk about what are the core concepts of customized employment. And on the left-hand side of your screen, you'll see a blue box, and there are 4 categories that embody customized employment. So we start with discovery. So whenever we're delivering customized employment, the very foundation of service delivery is discovery, is getting to know someone in a qualitative, not quantitative way, and that it takes the place of traditional assessment. It's not formal assessment, it's not comparative. It's really answering the question, who is this person? And we use discovery as a structure in helping us get to know who the job candidate is. The second phase is moving into job search planning. And so there you're taking the information that you've learned in discovery and you're working to build that plan into job development. The third phase, which is probably where you've received an authorization for job development, is you're moving into job development and negotiation. You're working on creating, not placing. And the last phase is post-employment supports. We all know that we're better when we have supports, whether that's through formal on-site job coaching, whether that's informal supports of people who support us in our life outside of our work. And it could be natural supports as well. But what does that post-employment support look like? So those are the 4 areas that make up customized employment. On the right-hand side of your screen, that's in the green box, is a circle. And in that circle, think of it as a clock. And so each quadrant is a skill that one would embody to successfully deliver customized employment services. And the Office of Disability Employment Policy, in partnership with EconSys, as well as various subject matter experts from across the country, work to put this together, this core competency document of customized employment. And so if you're looking at this wheel, and again, the wheel is what skills an employment specialist or an employment professional would embody to deliver customized employment. And the first one, if you look at the 1 o'clock position, is a positive and open approach to life. That's number 1. That's the top skill quality that we would embody to deliver customized employment. And my colleague, Doug Crandall, always says, is that something that we can teach? Is that something somebody embodies, right? And so think about that the number 1 skill is a positive and open approach to life. How we see someone makes all the difference. How we see possibility, how we perceive the world around us. In addition to that, skills around customized job development, customized employment components, understanding the process, respecting and relating to others, having skills in business and employment practices, having the ability and the comfort of business networking, which all looks a little bit different right now, right? Collecting, interpreting, and using information, communicating with others, and planning and organizing. And you'll receive a link to this document, which in total is about 7 or 8 pages. And the last 3 pages talk about the knowledge, skills, and abilities that one should embody. So if you're ever wanting to create a job description around a customized employment specialist, I highly recommend that you save this document and pull it out for that use. So those are the core concepts of customized employment. When we talk about ethical concerns that impact customized employment, there are common misunderstandings. And these have all of this information that I'm sharing with you today has just been collected from my experience as an employment specialist, as a director of employment programs, and as a consultant, and from my colleagues as well. And oftentimes, those misunderstandings that lead us to those ethical concerns start with when we've strayed from the model. And so what does that mean? That might mean shortcutting the discovery process. So it could be saying to yourself, well, gee, I just went to this great training from Griffin-Hammis, and they told me all about discovery. And, I really am identifying with the home visit and interviewing others, but, informational interviews really aren't for me. And it's really hard to do right now in a COVID world. So I'm just going to skip that step. Or I'm not really comfortable with discovery activities. So I think I'll just do one and sidestep the rest and then move on with the process. So when we stray from the model, that can really put us in an ethical situation. Also, a lack of training and tools, support to implement customized employment. And oftentimes that is at no fault of the employment specialist, but more of a systems issue of rolling out a service delivery model, but not necessarily providing the training, the tools, and the education to support someone to implement and understand the fidelity of the service delivery model. And lastly is capacity, right? And I think that also can be a systems barrier. It could also be looking at the possibility of how you structure your caseloads as an employment specialist to have the capacity to deliver the service with fidelity. And we'll dive into very specific examples of ethical concerns. So I also want to spend some time talking about an ethical decision-making guide. And this is far from perfect and has been really developed off of the work of Maki and Tarvidis, who have a great book here. I could probably show it to you, called The Professional Practice of Rehabilitation Counseling. And they've done a lot of work, and their expertise is on ethical decision-making, particularly in the world of rehabilitation counseling. So mainly vocational rehabilitation counselors. And a couple of important pieces, and you could also look at, you could just Google, ethical decision-making guide. So this is just a suggested structure because oftentimes, I think when we're new in the field, I know when I was a young job developer, no one sat down and said, here's an ethical decision-making guide for you to think about when you're stuck in an ethical dilemma, how you sift through that information, because oftentimes we're making decisions so quickly and from a reactive point that we rarely give ourselves the grace and the time to stop and think about what is the ethical dilemma and what do I do about it. So first, you identify the ethical dilemma. What is causing you angst and discomfort, and what's the pause, right? And after you've identified the ethical dilemma, and there may be multiple, right? Sometimes it's sifting through to say, well, what really is the issue? What really is the dilemma? But also recognizing that we all carry personal feelings and bias around a scenario. And recognizing that early on allows you to say, this is how I'm feeling about it. And sometimes our responses are built on experiences, right? Of maybe who that job candidate is or their family, based on maybe we've worked with this person in the past, or a colleague of ours has worked with this person in the past, and they say, oh, gee, Patty, I've worked with this job candidate before, and he's really going to be a struggle. That storytelling puts a personal bias in our head, and creates feelings around that about how we're supporting the person, right? And so recognizing that early on just says, okay, I know that I'm feeling this way about this scenario. And I'm just going to kind of put that aside to ensure that it doesn't impede on my decision making in result of this ethical dilemma. So recognizing those biases, and also then thinking about what ethical code or guiding principle applies to this scenario. So one, we identify our ethical dilemma, we reflect on our own feelings and bias that might impact our decision making. And then two, we identify, okay, what code of ethics, what guiding principles are out there that apply to this scenario? The good news is I'm just going to give you some today so that you can know where they are in the future. One, the APSI ethical guidelines. So again, as a young job developer, I don't think I had any idea that APSI ethical guidelines existed until I was well on my way into the job development world. APSI stands for Associations for Persons Supporting Employment First. You'll also receive the link to their ethical guidelines. The CRC Code of Ethics, so that's the Commission on Rehabilitation Counselor Certification. That is the group that CRCC governs essentially the CRC credential, which many vocational rehabilitation counselors are certified rehabilitation counselors, right? And so if you have your CRC, the CRCC gives you a code of ethics that you sign and you say, yes, I abide by these code of ethics. If you become a member of APSI, you may sign a document that says, yes, like I agree to these ethical guidelines in service delivery. And then in the last couple of years, Griffin-Hammis has spent an incredible amount of time, and my colleague, Dr. Hall, has devoted an immense amount of time to developing the Discovery Fidelity Scale and the Job Development Fidelity Scale, which give us tools and tenets and guidance to really stay faithful to the model. And that is an effort to really make sure that across the country that we are delivering services with fidelity, that we are sticking to those moral principles, those tenets, to deliver consistent services, so that if we follow the fidelity model, that hopefully we find ourselves in less ethical scenarios. And then third is to review the ethical guiding principles to the dilemma. So you identify the dilemma, what ethical guidelines would apply, and then we look at, within those ethical guidelines, how might each guiding principle be supported or compromised by the potential decision that we're considering. And then the fourth phase is that we envision a course of action to resolve the dilemma. So we want to review what would be some positive or negative implications of our decision. And as always, you want to consult with a supervisor if you haven't already done so. And it's okay if you haven't, maybe you've talked about it, but now if you jot down, right, if you have the ethical dilemma written out and you have looked at the code of ethics that applies to the scenario, and you've thought about, okay, how am I going to address this scenario? And then present that to your supervisor. I know as a supervisor, I would have greatly appreciated being able to have a more clear discussion around those ethical dilemmas, right? And so then you've really thought about the scenario, the issue, before you're presenting it to your supervisor. And if you are a director or a supervisor joining this conversation, when someone brings you those scenarios, to really pause, to listen, to absorb the scenario and what's going on, and to walk through this as a team, because we're all better when we work together. We're all stronger when we use the experience and and expertise of our colleagues and our friends. So the CRC ethical principles, if you go to the CRCC website, it's a giant document on their code of ethics. But Maki and Tarvidis, the book that I was telling you about, they did a really nice thing, and they broke it out into 6 specific areas of ethical principles. And so throughout our time together, if I'm referencing CRC ethical principles, it's based on the work of Maki and Tarvidis and their 6 areas. And so they have broken it out into autonomy, beneficence, non-malfeasance, fidelity, justice, and veracity. So what do all of those things mean, right? So I'll just give you a brief summary. Autonomy is informed consent. So we're protecting the rights of clients so that they are governing their own services. When we think about how might this be related to a counseling practice, it could be obtaining informed consent. It could be keeping confidentiality. It could be talking about service delivery expectations. So how are we talking about discovery, right? And how customized employment is a different set of tools than maybe what someone has traditionally experienced. Beneficence is to do good. To promote the well-being of clients or job candidates. When we think about how that relates to practice, that might be providing high-quality counseling services, delivering high-quality discovery. So that might impact, ensuring that we're receiving training and support to deliver those high-quality services, to doing it in a time-sensitive manner, in a qualitative service delivery model. Non-malfeasance is to do no harm to others. And of course, none of us got in the field or ever, I don't think, really intend to inflict harm. But the application to practice might be referring or not providing counseling services when we're not fully qualified. So that might be delivering discovery, but not ever attending discovery training or customized employment. It's not always intentional, but sometimes we can cause harm and it not being intentional, right? Another example would be not providing benefits counseling information if we didn't have that information, right? We don't intend to cause harm, but if we don't pay attention to the benefits planning information, we can indirectly cause harm. Fidelity. So fidelity, again, is to be faithful, right? To keep our promises, to honor the trust that a job candidate has placed in us. And the application to practice is keeping our word, right? Following through with what we say we are going to do. Justice is to be fair, right? In the treatment of all clients, how, and how many times have we allowed our bias to sneak in or not recognize that our bias has snuck in and impacted our service delivery? And how we would relate that to counseling practice might be ensuring that services are fully accessible, providing fair services, even if a client is perceived as difficult, right? When we are operating off the bias of, well, this person's been labeled as a job hopper, so there's nothing more that I can do. They just keep hopping from job to job, when maybe we've been missing something because we really haven't taken the time to answer the question, who is this person? And we end up placing them in jobs that aren't a good fit. And lastly is veracity, and this is to be honest, providing detailed professional disclosure. That might also include benefits conversations, supporting someone to assign their ticket, and being honest and forthright about what all that might mean in assigning their ticket to work. Benefits conversations, documentation as well, so capturing information objectively during the process of discovery. So those are some six guiding principles within the CRC Code of Ethics. Next is our APSI ethical guidelines. And I think these are probably much easier when you print it out. It's 2 pages, it's nice, it's concise. And it's broken out into individuality, choice, respect, participation, competence, social inclusion, community settings with minimal intrusion, employment, career planning, job development, job acquisition, work support, life support, career advancement, and staff training. Our last set is the Discovery Fidelity Scale, right? And so let's talk a few minutes just about what a Fidelity Scale is. So when you think about fidelity, you're thinking about being faithful or committed to something. We're holding up a set of beliefs. And so, but how do we measure service delivery, right? So the Discovery Fidelity Scale and the Job Development Fidelity Scale are tools that help us essentially measure the implementation of a service. And to be able to do this, you can see the documents on our website anytime. You do have to be trained to be able to use them and to score to validity, but they're tools that help us, again, measure that implementation. And so how does something become an evidence-based practice? Using the Fidelity Scale as part of that. So when you think about a promising practice, that's a service that we think delivers good results, right? So based on my experience, I think customized employment delivers good results, but it hasn't been validated through research. So the process of validating through research is using the Fidelity Scales to do that. So what takes something from a promising practice to an evidence-based practice is research. So in short, the Discovery Fidelity Scale, the Job Development Fidelity Scale, that's what we're doing. We're taking a promising practice and putting the evidence behind it to say this process works. Customized employment does result in quality outcomes for people with disabilities to work to their full potential, to live a life without poverty. We're studying our own process, right? So the whole goal, again, of a Fidelity Scale is to support best practice implementation, evidence-based implementation. So these are tools that are available to you, and I'll be referencing them as we walk through those ethical dilemmas. Check on time real quick. All right, so how many of you have experienced some of the next couple of bullet points? So oftentimes I think employment outcomes are influenced by the following. Decisions that rehabilitation professionals make based on a perceived employability of the persons with more significant disabilities, right? And this might be whether you're joining as a vocational rehabilitation counselor, as a case manager or service coordinator, where you're providing the referral. And this can impact you as well, right? That maybe you're working with someone who's interested in employment, but your perception is that maybe they're not ready for employment. And that halts that person's pathway of employment right there, right before we even get to the opportunity to supporting the person. It could also be not feeling totally comfortable connecting with businesses based on your own personal bias or your experience. And what that can sound like is, well, I'm not sure this person is ready for employment, or that's great that the person is interested in that business, but I don't want to burn a bridge there because I've heard this story about this, and this. Or I just don't feel comfortable talking to people I don't know, right? That all impacts employment outcomes based on our decision, based on our comfort level. And I think that there's some ethical dilemmas in there. And then carrying various responsibilities of an agency, which results in minimal time to focus on employment services. So I can't tell you the number of employment specialists that I've talked to who are also managing day programs, who are also managing facility-based environments where someone is depending on them Monday through Friday, where people are coming to a place that they have supervision. And anytime you have that responsibility on top of an individualized service, the day service will always take precedence because people are coming to you. They are expecting you to be there Monday through Friday from 8 to 3 or whatever that looks like. And the individualized employment service will always fall second because it's individualized, right? Because it's one person, and you can reschedule or you can push that to another time. And before you know it, we are delivering discovery for 6 to 8 12 months, and it's taken us much longer than ever anticipated or desired, but it's influenced by those decisions. So let's talk about dilemmas that we face, right? And again, all of these, there is nothing perfect about them. They are based on my own experience of colleagues, experience of things that I've observed, right? And I tried to organize it a little bit for us to think about the structure, right? So what's the dilemma? And this is kind of under the strain from the model idea. So the dilemma is that we use discovery to say that someone is unemployable or as a means to getting them to facility-based employment. When we look at the essential features of customized employment per the Fidelity scale, it's very clear. An employment seeker cannot fail discovery. When we look at our ethical guidelines and which ones might apply, under APSE, in the career planning section, it specifically states employment should be an option for any person who's interested in working, regardless of label, support need, or perceived functioning level. Within the CRC code, and specifically, again, in those 6 sections, justice, which means ensuring that services are fully accessible to all people and providing fair access to service, even if it's perceived that this client is difficult. So when we face the dilemma, or we're in this scenario where maybe you've been in a place where you've been using discovery to say someone is unemployable or as a means to facility-based employment, that under our ethical guidelines, under the constructs of the Fidelity model, that we're not using, discovery is never ever intended to be used as a way to put someone into a facility-based setting. You can literally not fail discovery. It's not possible. It's a qualitative service delivery model that always highlights somebody's contributions, their conditions, their skills. And so we look at that and say, okay, here's our guiding principle, and this is a dilemma, and how do we change that? What might be a different course of action that we would take to resolve that dilemma? Another ethical dilemma that I think we oftentimes face is not offering customized employment one person at a time. And what I mean by that is not necessarily that you have to carry a caseload of one, because I know that in some areas that it seems impossible. I do believe there are ways to make it possible, but it takes a lot of configuring of financials and projections and really getting good at delivering discovery services. And so, but what that does mean is that maybe you're carrying a smaller caseload of 5, no more than 7 individuals. And that when we deliver customized employment services, when we are doing discovery, that we are working with that one person, that one person, the information we learn about this person directs our service delivery. It directs where we're going. It directs what businesses we go and talk to. It's not done as a general networking. It's very specific. So how does that apply? What are the guiding principles that tell us that that is a dilemma? Within the Fidelity scale, it's listed that the employment seeker is the leader of his or her own discovery process. They are the director of where things are going. And even if that individual doesn't use words to communicate, they're still the leader of that process, because based on the information that we know about this person is what takes us to the next step. So another ethical dilemma might be when we shorten the process, right? When we don't get a full picture of who this person is. And so again, what other ethical guidelines might apply? So within APSE, we look at individuality. It clearly states that people receive assistance as unique individuals with varying interests, preference, and aptitudes. They shouldn't be grouped together on the basis of label, functioning level, or convenience of support. And And I have seen in some scenarios where folks are grouped together based on various reasons. And oftentimes that might be because of a funding structure, that might be because they're folding a discovery service into a group model. So, and I think it's important to note also that all codes of ethics, right? Every code of ethics that you can find within counseling practices is very clear that the client is the person for whom all duties are owed, right? They are first and foremost, right? And so when we don't deliver customized employment one person at a time, we risk the opportunity of that person's career pathway, right? And we use dollars to support them to potentially get into a job that they don't enjoy, which then that person is going to come back onto your caseload because we're placing rather than creating and customizing and ensuring the fit. So what's another dilemma? And I think oftentimes we see this one a lot for various reasons, right? And I hope that you know by participating in this that ethical dilemmas are not one specific person's fault, right? That oftentimes there are various contributors to these scenarios, right? But the dilemma is that we're taking way too long to deliver discovery, 6+ months to a year. In the Fidelity scale, it clearly states that discovery takes between 24 to 60 hours, between 8 to 14 weeks, right? So that's no more than a couple of months, 2 months, 3 months at most. And oftentimes, in order to resolve this ethical dilemma, we have to look within our program structure. When we have smaller caseloads of supporting 5 to 7 individuals, or even literally a caseload of one person at a time, it's much easier to deliver, to meet the expectations of 8 to 14 weeks when we have smaller caseloads, when we have a structure that supports that. And so also that discovery takes 24 to 60 hours. It's not a 10-hour service. It's not a 12-hour service. It's not a 2-hour service, right? And in some states, you may use various authorizations to get to that 24 or 60 hours of service delivery to really get to know who a person is. So it doesn't always just come in one authorization. It's being creative about how we build and braid funding to get there. So it is possible. The ethical guidelines that apply specifically within CRC, the fidelity, right? To be faithful, to keep our promises. When we talk about discovery being delivered in a short amount of time and then it takes longer, we're not keeping to our word, right? And oftentimes people can feel burnout. They feel let down. Families feel frustrated because they were hoping for a better outcome. Or oftentimes we will see an individual say, well, gee, I'm just going to go apply for positions through a traditional labor market, and they're trying to compete. It's difficult to compete with the job description, and they end up finding employment that isn't a good fit. The other piece is justice, right? So ensuring that services are fully accessible to all people, providing fair access to services, and again, even to difficult clients. And I think one of the reframes that I particularly have had in my experience is being a family member. Oftentimes I will hear so many times that a perception of a family member, of a parent is overbearing. They don't understand, they don't get it. And in all reality, it comes from oftentimes a very, very deep place of love. And it doesn't mean that we have to see eye to eye on it, right? But recognizing that behavior that we may not like, that's feeding into our own personal bias and impacting service delivery, if we can reframe that to say, well, I don't have to see eye to eye, but understanding that it comes from an unimaginable place of love is very different than this family member is a pain in my rear. So also really thinking about how we are perceiving the scenario and then looking at what changes could we make? So looking at this dilemma specifically, how might we fix that? How might we address that? Maybe it is taking a long time to deliver discovery because you're carrying various responsibilities as an employment specialist, where you're running various programs, and this is something that you're doing on the side. So that might be a conversation of looking at the funding structures, being able to carve out specific times within your schedule to ensure that you can focus on delivering customized employment. Maybe it's making sure that you have a backup to your backup to make sure that your days are protected to being devoted to the service delivery. Another dilemma might be job placement, right? So relying on food, filth, flowers, folding, fetching, the F jobs, which oftentimes we think of as I'm missing the word. We think of as entry-level positions, right? But the reality for folks with disabilities is that entry-level position can result in 30 years of picking up after someone. And how many of us are still in the very first jobs that we had? And the majority of us are not. And if you're still with the same company, are you still in the same position? Many of us are not, that we have a career pathway, right? And so oftentimes we will fall into our own comfort level of, we'll do really, really great discovery, but then we fall into placing, not following someone's vocational theme when it comes to job development. And to me, I think that's an ethical concern, right? Because we're finding jobs and filling vacancies as opposed to really focusing on who this person is. The Fidelity model blatantly tells us that the job seeker develops our pathway, right? Of making sure that it's a good fit for this person, that it's developed around who they are. Also, that each person is unique and has specific contributions and value in the labor market. And so no matter the impact of disability, that every person has contribution. And I think that goes back to our wheel of having that open and positive approach to life. That comes with knowing and believing that no matter who the person is, that everybody has contribution. You may not know what the contribution is, but you believe that it's there. You know that it's there. And that discovery is the pathway that helps us uncover what those are. The APSE ethical guideline would be found under job development, and how it applies is that jobs developed are reflective of personal interests, preferences, and abilities, as well as employer needs. And one of the things that APSE also talks about that's not in here is that they're individually arranged, again, based on the skills, preferences, aptitudes, life goals. While some work experiences can be productive for building an employment history when we think about entry-level employment, but these experiences are thought of as initial career steps, not as career fulfillment. So this is a one-stop, right? It's not just one time where I'm in the same position cleaning up after someone for 35 years. Also, customized employment gives us the tools, again, to dig deeper, to completing discovery, to answering the question, who is this person? And that builds the foundation to being more comfortable around negotiation as we moved into customized employment outcomes. So we'll keep plugging along here because we're running out of time. Another one, under the lack of training and tools and supports. The dilemma might be delivering customized employment without training and support, which is usually no fault of the employment specialist, but oftentimes the structure of the world that we live in, right? And so the essential feature of customized employment, and in the Fidelity scale, talks that customized employment, excuse me, this is the new doc. So the ODEP document that I referred you to, the essential features of customized employment. So this, I think, is applicable here as a guidance document because customized employment, the competency model, has 3 pages of knowledge, skills, abilities needed for CE, customized employment service delivery, right? And that the ethical guideline might be within CRCs of being trained, not intending to do harm, but if we don't have our own training and support mechanism of understanding what discovery is, what customized employment is, and having some guiding principles, we can cause harm by delivering discovery as something that it's not. Another one I want to talk about is systems and capacity, right? And I think this one is huge. The dilemma is that funding mechanisms are not in alignment with the evolution of best practice service development, service delivery. That oftentimes our funding mechanisms are not what they need to be in order for us to pay the employment specialist a living wage, to ensure that their caseloads can be minimized to 5 to 7 individuals. And these are oftentimes conversations that might take place with leadership of your vocational rehabilitation agencies, within your Medicaid agencies. It might also be a conversation to say, within the funding structures that we work within right now, how can we be creative in building or braiding the funding mechanisms, right? So it doesn't necessarily mean that you need a brand new one, but how can you use what you have to get you to where you need to be, to get you to delivering services to Fidelity? One of the essential features in the customized employment within the Fidelity scale, which is broken up into service delivery, but also systems. And one of the tenets is that discovery is accurately financed, right? So that there's an accurate rate that reflects the responsibility in delivering that service. And then it also falls onto providers. And if you're within a leadership position of a provider, how much of that increased rate is the job developer seeing? If we could increase rates, would that impact outcomes? Meaning, if we could increase the wages of our staff based on an increase in rates, how might we be able to lower our overhead expenses to put more money in our employees' pockets? I know these are very, very big conversations, and I'm more tossing them out as ideas, possibilities, things that maybe we could think about a little bit differently, because the reality is, within the world that we're living in, we are all really mining to be more creative than ever. And hopefully it also is a testament that every business has the ability to customize, because I don't know that there's a business out there right now that hasn't customized or changed their practices in some way. And what might the ethical guideline be? Within CRC, non-malfeasance, to do no harm to others, referring or not providing counseling services when we're not fully qualified. And in looking at what fully qualified mean might be different within your state systems as well. And the last dilemma that we're going to talk about is not capturing information on the discovery staging record or the vocational plan to Fidelity, right? And so within the Fidelity scale, it says discovery observations are always written objectively in descriptive sentences, reporting what is seen and heard in a positive manner. This is not a document that goes down the laundry list of diagnoses, of comparing or a traditional assessment. It's not intended to be a Q&A. It's meant to be a conversation. It's meant to capture who is this person in the most objective and descriptive way possible, that we're writing as a story as opposed to a Medicaid documentation note. And those are very different. And the ethical guideline that might apply here is within CRC, and specifically around veracity, that we're describing completely, one, who has access to the client files, and the client always has access to their files. How often also are we sharing the discovery staging record or the vocational plan to say, am I capturing you accurately? Are we on the right page? Do you feel like this really captures who you are? Is there anything I'm missing? to really put the client, the job candidate, they are the subject matter expert of their lives, and anyone else that they identify in their circle that knows them really well. So that might be families, friends, etc. But how often do we share what we're learning by saying, here's this document, take a look. Can you add anything? Can we build a stronger document on who this person is? And as an employment manager, when this isn't done and we experience turnover, we really kick ourselves in the pants because we don't have this information of who this person is. And then we go back and ask for maybe another authorization to do discovery because we didn't capture the information. And oftentimes, as I have the opportunity to work alongside folks, that you have all the information. It's in there, it's within your mind, but we're very good Medicaid documenters, but really getting out the details of who this person is. When we have a conversation, the information's always there, but making sure that we get it on paper. And I learned at an organization that I worked at that if we didn't write it down, it didn't happen. And same thing within discovery, and how we capture that information really makes a difference. So I ask you to think about what dilemmas might you be experiencing, specifically around customized employment. And this can also be a structure that maybe you just print out and put away in a folder. But thinking about what's the dilemma, what's my personal bias, experience, or perception, and just recognizing it. You don't have to, it's not an opportunity to beat yourself up at all, but just recognizing this is how I'm feeling about this. And setting that aside so that you can really focus on the ethical dilemma at hand. And what are the essential features of customized employment? Pull out the Fidelity scales. Even if you haven't received formal training, you can read them. They are on the Griffin-Hammis website. Reach out to any of us. Also, if you're stuck on something around an ethical dilemma, or you can certainly reach out to me. Ethical guidelines that might apply, right? So looking at the APSE ethical guidelines, looking at the CRC code of ethics, and then really thinking about what's the positive or negative implication on that would apply. So you're taking the dilemma and then looking at, here are the code of ethics, and then saying, okay, within individuality, is this dilemma, is it a positive or a negative implication on this specific guideline? And then thinking about that potential resolution, and then again, talking to someone before you implement the decision, because we are always better together. So in wrapping up our time together, which has flown by, I leave you with a couple of quotes from, I love the work of Simon Sinek, and he recently came out with this lovely little book called Together is Better. And a couple of my favorite quotes have been, our struggles are the short-term steps we must take on our way to long-term success. And sometimes I think these ethical dilemmas feel like really big struggles. And I assure you that as we work through them, they are the stepping stones to helping us get to long-term success, to implementing change, to delivering services with more fidelity than maybe we have in the past. And the second quote is, working hard for something we don't care about is called stress, and working hard for something we love is called passion. And each of you carved out time to be here today. And there are so many passionate people in this work. And I know that things are really, really hard for a lot of people right now. And so just knowing that your passion is heard, your passion matters, and that working hard for something that we care about, particularly this line of work, is very important. So this work needs you, this work needs your passion, and think about ethical dilemmas that might be giving you pause and how you might be able to work through them. And hopefully the hour that we've spent together today has given you some ideas or some resources or a thought process to think about things a little bit differently. Here are all of the references to everything that I've shared with you today. I've given you links so that you can just click on things and print them if you choose, or keep them in your bookmarks. So here's my contact information. I am always willing and happy to have a conversation with anyone who is interested. And now I'm going to stop sharing just in case anyone would like to have a quick conversation in the few minutes that we have left so that I can see the chat box. Ah, Corey, you're here. Excellent. Trevor, thanks. Vanessa, thank you as well. Vanessa, I think you're in Arizona. Yes. Enjoy the beautiful weather. It's chillier here. Hi, Pamela. Thanks for your feedback. Oh, the lovely Marcy was here too. Thank you. Thank you. Enjoy your Friday. Have a wonderful weekend.